Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Scholar. Somewhere in your home tonight, there may be a small animal curled nearby, watching you with eyes that never quite explain themselves. And here is the strange, quiet truth we are going to sit with together. That animal has been listening to your voice since before it could walk steadily. It has learned the particular rhythm of your footsteps on the stairs. It has built, somewhere in that small skull, a private map of who you are, where you tend to be, and how you tend to feel. Your cat understands more than you think. Tonight, we are going to find out exactly how much more. We will begin close, right where you are now, with the quiet ways a cat tracks your voice, your face, your location in a house it cannot always see through. Then we will drift backward, 9,500 years, to the first fragile moment a wild, solitary hunter decided that a human settlement was worth staying near. We will slip inside a cat's senses, through whiskers that read the air like fingertips, through eyes built for a world half in shadow, through ears that hear songs we will never know exist. We will listen closely to a language of meows and purrs that may have evolved for the sole purpose of speaking to us. We will look inside a mind that remembers, that plans, that quietly solves small problems in the dark. And near the end, we will find the bonds that hide in plain sight, the ones that make a cat, against everything its wild ancestors would suggest, choose to stay. If these slow, gentle journeys into the minds of the small creatures we live beside are something you enjoy, you are welcome to like, subscribe, or simply leave a thought below before you drift off. It helps this quiet corner of the internet find other tired minds like yours, one sleepy soul at a time. For now, there is nothing else you need to do. Let your shoulders fall, let your breathing slow and lengthen and grow heavy. Let your eyes close if they have not already. Somewhere near you, or somewhere far from here, a small animal is settling down too, unaware that we are about to spend the next few hours quietly admiring everything it understands about you. Let's begin. Part 1. The cat beside you. Fact 1. Let's start with the simplest thing your cat knows about you, the sound of your voice. Researchers have found that cats can reliably tell their owner's voice apart from a stranger's, even when the stranger says the exact same words, in the exact same tone, from the exact same speaker. A cat will not always leap up or come running the way a dog might. The recognition is quieter than that. A small turn of the ear, a shift of the head, a flicker of the pupils. It is there, every time, if you know how to look for it. Think of it like recognizing a close friend's footsteps in a crowded hallway, without ever turning around to check. You simply know. Somewhere in your cat's mind, your voice has become a signature, unlike any other sound in the house. So the next time you speak softly to a cat that appears to be asleep, know this. Some part of them has already identified exactly who is speaking, long before they open their eyes. But recognizing a voice is only the beginning of what a cat quietly builds about you. What if your cat could conjure your face just from hearing you speak? Fact 2. It turns out they can. In a series of experiments, cats were played their owner's voice and then shown either their owner's photograph or a stranger's. When the voice and the face did not match, the cats stared noticeably longer, as though something had gone quietly wrong with the world. That extra attention is what researchers call an expectancy violation. It only happens when a prediction has been broken, which means before the mismatched photo ever appeared, your cat's mind had already produced an expectation of your face, summoned by nothing but the sound of you. It is a little like closing your eyes when a close friend calls out your name across a room and picturing their face before you have even turned to look. The image simply arrives. There is something tender in this. Your voice and your face are not stored in your cat's mind as separate facts. They are woven together into a single, private impression of you. And this mental impression does not stop at your face. It seems to extend to your entire location in space. Fact 3. In one particularly striking study, researchers played a cat's owner calling their name from one speaker several times, then suddenly played the same voice from a second speaker, placed far across the room. To a cat, this is a kind of impossible event. A person cannot truly move from one place to another in an instant. And the cats reacted exactly as though they understood this. They startled. They stared longer at the new speaker, visibly more surprised than when the same trick was tried using a stranger's voice or a non-social sound like a bell. The implication is quietly remarkable. Your cat is not simply listening for you. It is holding a private, ongoing map of where you are, updated by sound alone, even when you are completely out of sight. It is not unlike the way you can sense, in the dark of a shared bedroom, roughly where a sleeping partner's body is, without needing to look or reach out. Your cat, in its own way, is doing something similar with you, all day long. Which raises a question. If a cat can track where you are, can it also keep track of who, exactly, you are called? Fact 4. Cats know their own names. Genuinely know them, not merely respond to a familiar tone of voice. In a set of experiments conducted in Japanese homes and cat cafes, cats were played their own name, followed by 3 or 4 other nouns that sounded similar in rhythm and length. Across the board, cats paid noticeably more attention when their actual name was spoken, even when a complete stranger was the one saying it. The recognition wasn't about who was talking. It was about the word itself. Unlike dogs, cats were never selectively bred over centuries to listen for their name and respond on command. Whatever recognition exists, they built quietly, on their own, simply through the accumulated experience of living beside you. It is a little like hearing your own name spoken across a noisy party, even while half distracted, half asleep on your feet. Something in you snaps awake just for that word. Your cat carries that same small, private alertness for the sound that means them. And that name, it turns out, is not the only one they have been quietly filing away. Fact 5. Cats appear to learn the names of everyone else in the household too, both feline and human, without anyone ever intending to teach them. In one study, cats were shown a photograph of a housemate, either a familiar cat or a human family member, right after hearing that individual's name called aloud. When the name and the face did not match, cats stared longer, the same expectancy violation seen before. Interestingly, this effect was strongest in cats that had lived in larger families for longer periods of time, suggesting the learning comes purely from quiet observation. watching who responds when a name is called, watching who approaches whom. It is a little like a child sitting quietly in the corner of a busy family gathering, slowly working out which name belongs to which face, without a single lesson ever being given directly to them. Somewhere in your cat's mind, there may be a small, unspoken roster of your entire household, each name paired carefully with a face. If a cat can memorize an entire family this way, a deeper question follows. Does something like real attachment grow out of all that quiet watching? Fact 6. It does, and the evidence for it looks remarkably familiar. Researchers adapted a classic test originally designed to study bonds between human infants and their caregivers, called the secure base test. A cat spends time in an unfamiliar room with their owner, is briefly left alone, and then reunited. Cats with a secure attachment stay calm upon reunion, dividing their attention between their owner and their surroundings, comfortable enough to keep exploring. Cats with an insecure attachment either avoid their owner entirely or cling and refuse to settle. When researchers tallied the results across dozens of cats, both kittens and adults, about 66% showed secure attachment. That number is almost identical to the rate found in human infants tested the same way, roughly 65%. It is the kind of coincidence that stops you for a moment. A wandering child who keeps glancing back to check a parent is still on the bench. A cat doing something remarkably similar in its own quiet register, but recognizing your voice, your face, and forming an attachment to you is not quite the same as understanding how you feel in a given moment. It turns out cats manage that too. Fact 7. Cats can tell the difference between a happy voice and an angry one, and they do not need to see your face to know it. In cross-modal recognition studies, cats were shown two images, one of a joyful human expression, one of an angry one, while a matching or mismatching emotional vocalization played. Cats reliably paired the correct sound with the correct face, and their own stress responses shifted accordingly. Angry voices triggered visible tension, happy ones did not. In separate research, cats watched how their owner reacted to something new and mildly unsettling. When the owner reacted with fear, the cats grew more anxious too, looking for an exit. When the owner reacted calmly, so did the cats. It is a little like walking into a room and sensing tension immediately, from posture and tone alone, before a single word has been exchanged. Your cat is doing that reading constantly, quietly recalibrating its own comfort around your emotional weather. There is also a physical piece to all this recognition, one written directly into the geometry of how a cat approaches you. Fact 8. When a cat walks toward you with its tail held straight up, tip slightly curled, it is performing what researchers call the tail-up display, and it turns out this particular greeting is used almost exclusively for approaching humans, and for approaching cats they consider close, trusted companions. The behavior appears to be an echo of something much older, a kitten approaching its mother, tail raised, just before nursing begins. Some researchers now suspect that cats may treat their human caregiver less like a rival to be negotiated with, and more like a parental figure, deserving of that same specific, ancient greeting. It is, in its own small way, a kind of handshake, one your cat has been offering you since it was a kitten, without either of you ever agreeing on what it meant. Even the smallest, most repetitive rituals in a cat's day, it turns out, are quietly built around you. Fact 9. Left entirely to their own devices, cats are natural grazers, built to eat somewhere around a dozen small meals scattered across a full day and night. But most house cats do not follow that ancient rhythm at all. They follow yours. Cats reliably anticipate feeding times, departures, and arrivals, gathering by a door minutes before it opens, appearing in the kitchen just ahead of a scheduled meal. This is not magic. It is quiet, accumulated learning, built from the same associative machinery that lets any animal link a cue to an outcome. But the result is striking all the same. A once solitary hunter, with no evolutionary reason to care what time it is, has reorganized its entire daily rhythm around the comings and goings of a different species. Somewhere in that rearranged schedule is a kind of trust. The world outside can be unpredictable, but you, apparently, are not. Fact 10. So return, for a moment, to the image we opened with tonight. A small animal, curled nearby, watching you with eyes that never quite explain themselves. We now know a little more about what sits behind that quiet gaze. A voice, recognized and filed away as uniquely yours. A face, summoned instantly at the sound of you. A private map, tracking your location even when you are out of sight. A name, both yours and everyone else's in the house, slowly learned through nothing but patient watching. An attachment structurally similar to the one between a parent and a small child. An emotional radar tuned quietly to your happiness or your distress. A greeting borrowed from infancy, offered specifically to you. None of this is small, and none of it was necessary. A cat could have remained exactly what its ancestors were, a solitary, self-sufficient hunter with no real need for any of this quiet, careful attention toward another species. So why did it happen at all? Why would an animal built for solitude ever choose to learn so much about a creature entirely unlike itself? For that answer, we have to leave the living room behind completely and travel back, further than any of us can easily imagine, to the edge of the very first human farms. Part 2. How Cats Learned to Live with Us. 2. Fact 11. Somewhere around 10,000 years ago, in the region we now call the Fertile Crescent, humans began doing something entirely new. They stayed in one place, and they grew grain, and they stored it. Grain stores attract rodents. Rodents attract small wild hunters, and so, quietly, without a single person deciding to invite them, wildcats began drifting closer to human settlements, drawn by an easy, abundant meal that had nothing to do with us directly. This is what researchers call the commensal pathway to domestication. No one captured these cats. No one bred them on purpose. They simply noticed an opportunity and stayed for it, generation after generation, growing slightly more comfortable with human proximity each time. It is a little like a food truck that quietly parks near a busy office building, not because it was invited, but because it noticed where the hungry people already gather. In this sense, your cat did not choose you the way a dog was chosen by us. Its ancestors chose humanity first, on their own terms, for reasons that had nothing to do with affection at all. And the evidence for just how early this closeness began is far older than most people realize. Fact 12. On the island of Cyprus, archaeologists uncovered a grave roughly 9,500 years old. Inside it lay a human, and beside that human, deliberately placed, lay a wildcat. Cyprus has no native wildcats, which means this particular animal did not wander there on its own. It was carried by boat, by people who apparently valued its presence enough to bring it along to a new home entirely surrounded by sea. This single burial pushes the timeline of close human-cat relationships back nearly twice as far as the traditionally cited domestication story centered on ancient Egypt. Long before pyramids, before written language as we know it, someone cared enough about a cat to make sure it was buried close by. We will never know that person's name or what they called the animal beside them, but the placement itself speaks clearly enough. This was not an accident of geography. It was a choice, made in grief, about who belonged near whom. Fact 13. Nearly every domestic cat alive today, from a farmhouse tabby to a city apartment shorthair, traces its ancestry back to a surprisingly small starting point. Genetic analysis of cats and their wild relatives across the globe found that virtually the entire worldwide population descends from just 5 founding female lineages, all originating in the Near East, all belonging to the same wildcat subspecies that first drifted toward those early grain stores. 5. Out of a species that now numbers in the hundreds of millions. It is a little like discovering that nearly everyone in a sprawling worldwide family reunion can trace their name back to 5 sisters from one small town thousands of years ago. Every purr on every lap tonight, in every corner of the world, carries a thread back to that same small handful of ancestors, and to the same quiet decision to stay near a human farm instead of retreating into the wild. Fact 14. The Near East was not the only place this story unfolded. Thousands of miles away, at an ancient farming village called Quanhu Chun in what is now China, archaeologists found cat remains dating back over 5,000 years. Chemical analysis of the bones revealed something remarkable. These cats had been eating a diet heavy in millet, the exact grain the villagers grew and stored, filtered through the rodents that fed on it. One particular cat had eaten even more millet than the rest, and far less meat than expected, suggesting it was scavenging table scraps or being deliberately fed by someone in the village. This population was not related to the 5 founding lineages from the Near East. It appears to be a separate, parallel relationship, arising independently, built from the same basic pattern. Grain draws rodents, rodents draw cats, cats stay. 2 unrelated human civilizations on opposite sides of the world arrived at nearly the same quiet arrangement with the same wary, watchful animal. Fact 15. Egypt is where this relationship finally deepened into something closer to true domestication, and the evidence suggests it happened earlier and more deliberately than the familiar story usually allows. At a burial site in Hierakonpolis in Upper Egypt, archaeologists uncovered cats dating back nearly 6,000 years. One skeleton showed healed fractures in its leg bones, meaning the animal had been cared for, tended, kept alive through an injury that would likely have killed it in the wild. Elsewhere in the same burial ground, 6 cats were found together in a single pit: a male, a female, and 4 kittens from 2 separate litters, born out of season from what wild breeding cycles would predict. That detail matters. It suggests these animals were not simply wandering in from outside. They were being kept, and possibly bred, under some form of human control, centuries before cats appear formally in Egyptian art and religious life. Somewhere in these bones is the quiet beginning of something new. Not just tolerance, actual care. Fact 16. Something changed inside cats during all of this, not just in their behavior, but in their genes. When researchers compared the genomes of domestic cats to their closest wild relatives, they found clear evidence of positive selection acting on a specific group of genes, ones linked, in other studied animals, to reduced fear responses, sharper memory, and a stronger ability to learn from rewards like food. In other words, the raw biological ingredients for tameness, for calm, for the ability to form the kinds of bonds we spent our first hour exploring together, appear to have been quietly selected for, likely without any human ever consciously choosing which cats got to breed. It is as though evolution itself was gently favoring the boldest, calmest, most curious cats, simply by letting them live closest to the food, and therefore closest to us. Fact 17. And yet, for all of that inner change, look at a modern house cat's body, and you will find something strange. It looks almost exactly like its wild ancestor. Compare a domestic cat's skeleton to that of the Near Eastern wildcat it descended from, and the differences are remarkably small. No dramatic new sizes, no wildly reshaped skulls. Nothing like the astonishing range we see across dog breeds, from a tiny terrier to a towering mastiff, all descended from the same wolf ancestor. For most of their shared history with us, cats were valued for one thing only: catching rodents, and that job required no redesign at all. Only in the last century or so did humans begin actively breeding cats for appearance, the way we had already been doing with dogs for thousands of years. So the animal curled beside you tonight is, in body, remarkably close to the wild hunter it descended from. It is the mind, quietly, that has traveled the furthest distance. Fact 18. This helps explain something curious about cats that dog owners often find puzzling. Cats were never bred the way dogs were for obedience or trainability or eagerness to work alongside us. Dogs carry clear genetic signatures of selection for traits like responsiveness to human cues, sustained attention-seeking, and comfort in prolonged social contact, the result of thousands of years of humans deliberately choosing which dogs to breed for exactly those qualities. Cats show far less evidence of anything similar. Whatever sociability exists in a modern house cat appears to have emerged mostly on its own, through the same self-selected process that first drew wildcats toward grain stores, rather than through humans actively selecting for friendliness generation after generation. Which means every quiet moment of attachment we explored earlier, the voice recognition, the secure base behavior, the tail-up greeting, was not handed to cats by human design. It was something they built themselves, almost as a side effect of choosing to stay. Fact 19. From that original handful of founders in the Near East, cats spread slowly outward, following the same routes that carried grain, trade goods, and travelers. Roman ships in particular seem to have played an outsized role, carrying cats across the Mediterranean and into Europe as an effective, low-maintenance solution to the constant problem of rodents aboard a wooden vessel or inside a granary. Wherever agricultural life took hold, and wherever ships needed to protect their cargo, cats found new, welcoming coastlines waiting for them. It is a strange thing to consider. Somewhere in your cat's deep ancestry may be a working ship's cat, patrolling a cargo hold for stowaway rodents on some voyage none of us will ever know the details of. A small, self-employed guardian riding along not out of loyalty but opportunity, and staying, eventually, out of something more. Fact 20. So here is where we find ourselves. A wild, solitary hunter, largely unchanged in body across 10,000 years, that quietly rewired parts of its own mind, mostly on its own terms, in order to live safely and successfully beside an entirely different species. No one bred your cat to recognize your voice. No one selected, generation after generation, for the ability to hold your face in mind, or to map your location from sound, or to greet you the way a kitten once greeted its mother. Those things simply emerged, slowly, from 10,000 years of choosing proximity over distance, food over freedom, and, eventually, something that looks remarkably like trust. Everything we explored in our first hour together, tonight, was not designed. It was earned, quietly, by an animal that never had to stay, and chose to anyway. But a cat's mind did not do all of this alone. It had extraordinary tools to work with, senses built over millions of years for survival in near total darkness, and it is time now to step inside those senses and feel the world exactly as your cat feels it. Part 3. The World Through Whiskers. 2. Fact 21. A newborn kitten enters the world almost completely cut off from it. Its eyes are sealed shut. Its ears do not respond to sound for nearly 2 weeks. And yet, within moments of birth, that same kitten can already do something essential to survival. It can smell. Scent is the very first sense to switch on, fully formed, before sight, before hearing, before almost anything else. A kitten uses nothing but its nose to navigate across its mother's body to find a nipple, in complete darkness, in a world it cannot yet see or hear. It is a little like being dropped into an unfamiliar room with your eyes closed and your ears plugged, and still managing to find the one warm, safe corner, guided by nothing but a trail of scent in the air. Long before a kitten knows what its mother looks like or what her voice sounds like, it already knows exactly how she smells. And that, for a little while, is the entire world. Fact 22. That early gift never really fades. An adult cat's sense of smell is thought to be somewhere around 14 times stronger than a human's. The reason lies in the architecture of the nose itself. A cat's olfactory epithelium, the specialized tissue lined with scent receptors, is roughly 5 to 10 times larger than ours, packing in anywhere from 45 million to 200 million individual odor-sensitive cells. Compare that to a human nose, which manages with somewhere around 5 to 10 million. It is a little like the difference between a single microphone and an entire concert hall's worth of them, all listening for the same faint sound. Every room you walk into, your cat is quietly reading a layer of information you will never have access to, an invisible history of who was here, what they touched, and how long ago they left. Fact 23. Cats have a second, secret way of smelling, one entirely separate from the nose. Tucked into the roof of the mouth, just behind the front teeth, sits a small structure called the vomeronasal organ, sometimes known as Jacobson's organ. When a cat catches an especially interesting scent, often one linked to territory or another animal, it will slightly open its mouth, curl back its upper lip, and hold perfectly still for a moment. This peculiar expression is called the Flamen response, and what it is actually doing is drawing air directly onto that hidden organ, which connects to parts of the brain tied to social, feeding, and reproductive behavior. It is a little like having a second nose, wired straight into a much older, more instinctive part of the mind, reserved only for the messages that matter most. If you have ever caught your cat making that strange, slightly grimacing face at an empty patch of floor, know that it was reading something there, in a language built entirely out of scent. Fact 24. Every time your cat rubs its cheek against your leg, or against the corner of a doorway, or against the edge of your favorite chair, it is doing far more than seeking affection. It is writing. Cats carry scent glands scattered across their face, their flanks, and the base of their tail, and rubbing deposits a small trace of pheromone wherever they go, alongside the more obvious methods of scratching and marking. Among cats that live closely together, this constant exchange of scent gradually blends into something researchers call a shared colony odor, a kind of communal signature that says, quietly, these individuals belong to the same group. When your cat rubs against you, it is folding you into that same signature, marking you gently as part of its trusted circle. It is a little like being handed a family crest without ever being told what it means, and wearing it anyway, simply because it was offered. Fact 25. Now to the whiskers themselves, arguably the most quietly remarkable feature on a cat's entire body. A cat carries roughly 24 long, movable whiskers on its upper lip alone, arranged in 4 rows on either side of the nose, plus additional sets above the eyes, along the cheeks, on the chin, and even on the backs of the front legs. Each one is considerably thicker than an ordinary hair, and rooted nearly 3 times deeper into the skin, surrounded by a dense cluster of nerve endings. It is a little like the difference between an ordinary strand of hair and a finely tuned antenna, built specifically to catch signals the rest of the body would miss entirely. These are not decorations. They are among the most sensitive instruments a cat possesses, quietly gathering information about the world from the very moment they make contact with it. Fact 26. Deep in a cat's brain, there is a region dedicated almost entirely to processing whisker information, called the barrel cortex. Structurally, it closely resembles the visual cortex, the part of the brain that processes what the eyes see. This is a striking detail. It suggests that touch information from the whiskers is assembled piece by piece into something remarkably like a picture, a three-dimensional map of nearby space, built not from light, but from countless tiny points of contact with the air and the objects around them. It is a little like reading an entire room in complete darkness, using only your fingertips, gradually assembling a mental image of every surface, every edge, every gap, without ever needing to see it directly. In a very real sense, a cat's whiskers do not simply feel the world. In the dark, they help a cat see it. Fact 27. There is a very practical reason a cat's whiskers extend almost exactly as wide as its body. They are a built-in measuring tool, helping a cat judge, in an instant, whether a gap or an opening is wide enough to fit through, without any trial and error. Whiskers solve another problem too. A cat's eyes cannot focus on anything held extremely close to its own nose, which creates an odd blind spot right where its mouth and paws do most of their work. High-speed footage has revealed that in this exact moment, a cat's whiskers move forward and curl slightly downward, forming a small protective basket around the muzzle, tracking the exact position of prey the eyes simply cannot see. It is a little like closing your eyes for the final, most delicate step of a task, and trusting your hands completely to finish it. For a cat, the whiskers finish what the eyes cannot. Fact 28. Whiskers do more than sense the world. They quietly announce a cat's mood to anyone paying close enough attention. A relaxed, contented cat carries its whiskers loosely, curved gently toward the ground. A frightened or defensive cat pulls them back tightly against the sides of its face, flattening them out of the way. A cat in pain often pushes its whiskers stiffly forward, tense and alert. It amounts to an entire second facial expression, layered quietly over the more familiar signals of ears and eyes, one most people never learn to read at all. It is a little like realizing a close friend has been telling you exactly how they feel the whole time, through some small, consistent gesture you simply never noticed to look for. The next time your cat's face seems unreadable, look slightly lower. The whiskers are very likely already telling you everything. Fact 29. Given how sensitive whiskers are, a popular idea has spread in recent years, one you have likely encountered yourself. The notion that a deep, narrow food bowl causes something called whisker stress, an unpleasant sensation from whiskers repeatedly brushing the sides of the dish. Researchers actually put this to the test, feeding a group of cats from both a standard bowl and a wide, shallow, whisker-friendly one. The result was quietly surprising. Cats eating from the whisker-friendly dish did not eat more food, spend more time eating, or drop noticeably less food than they had before. A little more than half showed a mild preference for the wider dish, but the underlying claim of genuine distress found no real scientific support. It is a gentle reminder that even our most caring assumptions about a cat's inner life deserve a second, closer look, rather than simple acceptance. Fact 30. We will close this hour with one final, curious gap in a cat's sensory world. Something almost every cat on Earth is quietly missing. Cats cannot taste sweetness, not faintly, not partially. The genetic instructions for building a sweet taste receptor appear to be broken entirely in their DNA, a small, permanently disabled switch. Where a dog will happily seek out something sugary, a cat shows no interest whatsoever, neither craving it nor avoiding it. To a cat, sweetness is not unpleasant. It is simply invisible, a flavor that, as far as its tongue is concerned, does not exist. In its place, cats are finely tuned to the taste of amino acids, the building blocks of meat, and quick to reject anything bitter or sharply sour, an old defense against poison. It is a little like living your whole life without ever knowing an entire color existed, not from any deprivation, simply because the part of you built to perceive it was never switched on. A cat's world, we are slowly learning, is built from an entirely different set of signals than our own. And nowhere is that more true than in the way a cat actually sees. Part 4. Eyes built for twilight. Fact 31. Look closely at a cat's eye in different kinds of light, and you will notice something a human eye simply cannot do. In bright daylight, the pupil narrows down to a thin, dark vertical line. In near total darkness, it can swell open to nearly fill the entire eye. The range is extraordinary. A cat's pupil can expand roughly 300 times its smallest size. A human pupil, by comparison, only manages around 15 times. That is the difference between a narrow drinking straw and a wide open door. It is a little like carrying a camera lens that can adjust, in a fraction of a second, from a pinhole to a wide open aperture and back again without ever needing to think about it. This single sliver of muscle is part of what allows a cat to move seamlessly between a sunlit windowsill at noon and a near pitch-black room at midnight, adjusting instantly to whichever world it finds itself in. Fact 32. If you have ever caught a cat's eyes glowing in the dark, caught briefly in a beam of light, you were looking at one of the more elegant tricks in the animal kingdom. Behind a cat's retina sits a mirror-like layer of tissue called the tapetum lucidum. Light that passes through the retina without being absorbed the first time bounces off this layer and passes back through a second time, giving the light-sensitive cells a second chance to catch it. That reflected light is also what escapes back out toward you, creating the eerie glow. The practical benefit is enormous. Thanks to this internal mirror, along with a retina packed with light-sensitive cells, a cat can see reasonably well using roughly 1/6 of the light a human would need for the same scene. It is a little like having a built-in reflector behind every window in your house, quietly doubling whatever faint light manages to sneak inside. Fact 33. That extraordinary night vision comes with a quiet trade-off, one most owners never notice. A cat's retina is dominated by rod cells, the type especially good at detecting dim light and movement, making up around 95% of the light-sensitive cells present. Cone cells, the type responsible for sharp detail and color, are comparatively rare. The result is a visual world that excels in darkness, but blurs somewhat in full daylight. Estimates suggest a cat's visual acuity sits somewhere between 20/100 and 20/200, meaning a cat has to stand as close as 20 feet away to see clearly what a person with normal vision could make out from 100 to 200 feet. It is a little like trading in a high-resolution camera for one built almost entirely for shooting in the dark, brilliant at night, softer and less precise in the sun. Your cat, in other words, may not be looking at fine detail nearly as often as you assume. It is watching for something else entirely. Fact 34. That something else is movement, and a cat's retina is arranged specifically to catch it. Rather than a small, pinpoint area of extra sharp focus, the kind humans rely on called the fovea, cats have something called a visual streak, a wide horizontal band of especially sensitive cells stretched across the retina. It is built less for fixing sharply on a single still point, and more for scanning broadly across the horizon, alert to anything that shifts or moves within it. It is a little like the difference between a spotlight, aimed carefully at one exact spot, and a wide floodlight, built to notice the instant anything crosses through it. This is very likely why a cat can seem to entirely ignore a toy sitting perfectly still just a few feet away, and then explode into full alert the moment that same toy so much as twitches. Stillness, to a cat's eyes, is almost invisible. Motion is everything. Fact 35. There is one strange blind spot hidden inside all of this finely tuned vision, and it sits closer to a cat than almost anywhere else, directly beneath its own nose. A cat's eyes simply cannot focus on anything held within a few inches of its face. Bring a treat, a toy, or your own finger in too close, and it effectively vanishes from clear sight. This is precisely why the whiskers we spent an entire hour with earlier matter so much. Remember the small protective basket they form around a cat's muzzle, tracking prey too close for the eyes to see. That is not a coincidence, and not a redundant backup system. It is the whiskers stepping in to do a job the eyes were never built to handle, filling a blind spot in real time. It is a little like a hand quietly reaching out to steady something the eyes have already lost sight of. Fact 36. When it comes to color, a cat's world is noticeably muted compared to ours, though not entirely without color either. Cats possess only 2 types of the cone cells responsible for color vision, compared to the 3 types most humans carry. This leaves them somewhere in the territory of a person with red-green color blindness, able to distinguish blues and violets fairly well, but far less able to separate shades toward the red end of the spectrum. There is a curious twist, though. A study examining the lenses of several mammals, cats included, found that a surprising amount of ultraviolet light passes through and reaches the retina, light that a human lens filters out almost entirely. This raises an intriguing, still open possibility that cats may perceive a faint layer of the world, in ultraviolet, that remains completely invisible to us. It is a little like discovering a familiar room might contain an entire extra layer of light, one your own eyes were simply never built to register. Fact 37. Open your eyes right now, wherever you are, and take in roughly how much of the world sits within your field of view. A cat, positioned the exact same way, would see slightly more of it. Their visual field spans close to 200 degrees, compared to a human's roughly 180. That wider view comes with a small trade-off. The area where both eyes overlap, the zone responsible for sharp depth perception, is narrower in a cat than in a human, though still considerably wider than in an animal built purely to watch for predators from the side, like a rabbit or a deer. It is a little like the difference between a camera lens built for a broad, sweeping landscape shot and one built to isolate a single subject with precise depth. A cat's eyes strike a careful balance between the two, wide enough to stay aware, focused enough to hunt. Fact 38. Even the very shape of a cat's pupil carries a hidden clue about the kind of life it evolved to lead. Researchers who compared pupil shapes across dozens of animal species noticed a striking pattern. Predators that hunt low to the ground, ambushing prey at close range, tend to have vertical, slit-shaped pupils, exactly like a house cat's. Taller predators, hunting from higher vantage points, along with grazing prey animals watching for danger from every direction, tend to have round or horizontal pupils instead. A vertical slit, it turns out, is especially good at sharpening the judgment of distance for something moving directly in front of a low, ground-level hunter, precisely the situation a cat, or its wild ancestors, would have faced constantly while stalking a mouse through short grass. It is a little like discovering that the exact shape of someone's tools quietly reveals the exact job they were built to do. Fact 39. There is one more small detail worth pausing on, easy to miss, and strangely touching once you notice it. Cats do not need to blink nearly as often as humans do. Human eyes rely on frequent, regular blinking to stay properly lubricated. A cat's eyes are protected differently, aided by a third inner eyelid that sweeps quietly across the surface, largely out of sight. Because of this, a cat can hold its gaze steady on something, unblinking, for far longer stretches than a person comfortably could, which makes it all the more meaningful on the rare occasions a cat does close its eyes slowly in front of you, gently, deliberately, rather than out of any real physical need. We will return to that particular gesture soon, because it turns out to carry far more meaning than most people realize. Fact 40. So here, at the close of this hour, is the cat your eyes have been resting near tonight, seen finally through its own eyes instead of yours. A world softer around the edges than the one you see, dimmer in bright daylight, quieter in color, but alive, almost electrically alive, with the faintest flicker of movement. It is not a lesser way of seeing. It is simply a different one, shaped by millions of years spent hunting in the last soft light of dusk and the first gray light of dawn, in the narrow, precious hour when most other eyes have already given up and gone home. There is something worth sitting with in that image before we move on. Your cat has never once seen the world the way you do, and yet, somehow, across all of that difference, it still finds its way, every single day, back to you. But sight is only one thread in this. There is another sense waiting for us now, one built with such precision that it can hear things happening in complete silence, in another room, from sounds most of us will never register at all. Part 5. A symphony only they can hear. 2. Fact 41. Somewhere above the edge of what your own ears can register, your cat's world keeps going. Human hearing generally tops out somewhere around 20,000 Hz. A cat's hearing continues climbing into the range of 64,000 Hz or higher, roughly an octave and a half beyond what you will ever consciously hear. Their range even extends further than a dog's, reaching about a full octave higher. It is a little like discovering that the room you are sitting in right now contains an entire extra layer of sound, quietly playing just above the ceiling of what your own ears were built to notice. Somewhere in that invisible upper register, sounds are happening around you constantly that your cat hears clearly, and you will simply never know occurred at all. Fact 42. That extraordinary upper range is not an accident. It is a tool built for exactly one purpose. Small rodents, the primary prey of a hunting cat, communicate and move in exactly this ultrasonic register, well above the range most larger animals can detect. A cat's hearing evolved to reach precisely into that hidden acoustic space, allowing it to track the rustle, the squeak, the tiny vocal exchange of a mouse it cannot yet see. It is a little like being handed a radio, permanently tuned to a frequency almost no one else can access, one that happens to broadcast, exclusively, the exact sounds your next meal makes. Every time your cat's ear twitches toward an apparently silent corner of the room, there is a real possibility that, to your cat, that corner is not silent at all. Fact 43. Now look closely, if you can, at the shape of a cat's ear. Those small, alert triangles are far more mobile than they appear. Each ear pinner is controlled by roughly 32 individual muscles, allowing it to rotate up to 180 degrees, independently of the other ear, swiveling forward, backward, or sideways almost instantly to lock onto a sound. It is a little like having two small, independently steerable satellite dishes mounted on top of your head, each one free to aim itself at a completely different sound at the same moment. The next time you see one of your cat's ears flick briefly backward while the rest of its body stays perfectly relaxed, know that it has simply redirected a small, precise instrument towards something worth paying attention to, without ever needing to move anything else at all. Fact 44. All of that mobility serves an even more precise purpose, pinpointing exactly where a sound is coming from. Researchers have found that a cat can judge the source of a sound to within about 3 inches from a distance of roughly 1 yard away, and can do so in about 0.06 of a second, faster than the blink of a human eye. The trick relies on comparing the tiniest possible difference in timing and loudness between what reaches the left ear and what reaches the right, a difference measured in fractions of a millisecond. It is a little like a skilled sound engineer standing in a completely dark room, able to point immediately and accurately toward the exact source of the faintest click or rustle, purely by ear. For a small hunter working in low light, this kind of precision is not a luxury. It is very often the difference between a successful hunt and an empty one. Fact 45. A cat's hearing is not only wide-ranging and precisely located, it is also remarkably fine-grained. Studies suggest cats can distinguish between two sounds that differ in pitch by as little as 1/10 of a musical tone, a difference so small that most untrained human ears would never notice it at all. For comparison, that is roughly 10 times finer than the smallest interval most people can reliably detect without years of musical training. It is a little like sitting beside a professional piano tuner, someone able to hear a note drift ever so slightly out of true, long before anyone else in the room even suspects something has changed. Your cat, in its own quiet way, may be living inside a far more finely detailed soundscape than you are, every single day, without ever mentioning it. Fact 46. Given ears this refined, it may not be surprising that cats have their own very specific taste in music, one that has little to do with ours. In one study, researchers composed short pieces of music built specifically around sounds and rhythms cats naturally respond to, including tempos similar to purring and patterns reminiscent of nursing. When cats were given the choice between these specially composed pieces and ordinary music written for humans, they consistently showed a stronger response to the cat-specific compositions. It is a little like discovering that the elegant, classical piece you assumed your cat quietly appreciated on the stereo was, all along, simply background noise to them, while a completely different, unfamiliar melody was the one actually catching their attention. Their ears, tuned to an entirely different set of priorities than ours, are simply listening for something else. Fact 47. It is worth remembering, for a moment, just how recently all of this switches on. A newborn kitten, as we learned earlier, can already smell its way to safety within moments of birth. Hearing takes considerably longer to arrive, usually not becoming reliable until somewhere between 11 and 16 days of age. For nearly 2 full weeks, a kitten lives in near silence, guided entirely by scent and touch, before the vast, layered soundscape we just explored gradually switches on, note by note. It is a little like a concert hall, slowly filling with sound after a long, complete silence, one instrument joining at a time, until eventually the entire orchestra is finally playing. By the time that kitten becomes the cat curled beside you tonight, that orchestra has been playing, uninterrupted, for years. Fact 48. There is one final layer worth mentioning, and it circles back to something we touched on earlier without quite finishing the thought. Ears are not only for listening, they are for speaking too, in their own quiet way. Researchers studying interactions between cats found that when 2 cats approach each other, the position of their ears predicts the outcome far more reliably than the position of their tails. When both cats hold their ears upright and forward, the encounter almost always goes well, ending in closeness rather than distance. Any other combination tends to end with the cats simply moving apart. It is a little like realizing that a subtle shift in someone's posture, easy to miss if you are only listening to their words, was actually the clearest signal in the entire conversation. An instrument built for receiving sound, it turns out, doubles as an instrument for sending a message of its own. Fact 49. Pause for a moment and take stock of everything gathered so far tonight. A nose that read the world before the eyes ever opened. Whiskers that quietly built a 3-dimensional map out of touch alone. Eyes tuned for the last light of dusk. And now, ears capable of hearing an entire register of sound that exists just beyond the edge of human perception. None of these senses evolved for your benefit. Every one of them was shaped, patiently, across millions of years, to keep a small, solitary hunter alive in a world without any guarantees. And yet, somehow, all 4 of them are turned toward you right now, at this very moment, in whatever room your cat happens to be resting in tonight. Fact 50. Which brings us to the question waiting quietly underneath everything we have covered so far. A cat can smell you, recognize your face, track your location by voice, read your emotional tone, and hear things about you that you cannot even hear about yourself. But senses alone only describe what a cat notices. They do not yet explain what a cat is actually trying to say back to you in the small sounds, gestures, and glances it offers you throughout an ordinary day. It is time now to listen a little differently, not for what your cat can hear, but for what it has quietly been trying to tell you all along. Part 6. The Secret Language. Fact 51. Here is a strange fact to sit with. The meow, the single sound most people would call the defining voice of a cat, is barely a cat language at all. It is closer to a human one. Adult cats rarely meow at each other. Among themselves, meowing shows up occasionally in territorial disputes or briefly during mating season, but it is not a primary tool of everyday cat conversation. Directed at humans, however, it becomes constant, flexible, and central, used to ask for food, attention, play, or simply to be let through a door. It is a little like discovering that a close friend speaks a rich, complex language among their own family, but developed an entirely separate, simplified dialect just for talking to you specifically. Your cat did not bring the meow with it from the wild to use on you. In a very real sense, it built that particular voice for you, and largely for you alone. Fact 52. That specialized voice has grown remarkably diverse in the process. When researchers compared the meows of domestic cats to those of their closest wild relatives, including wild cats, jungle cats, and even cougars, the domestic cat's meows stood out clearly. They varied far more widely in structure than the meows of any wild species tested, a level of vocal flexibility researchers describe as increased plasticity, likely shaped by generations of humans responding more warmly to certain sounds than others. It is a little like watching one small regional dialect branch out into dozens of distinct local accents, simply because it kept being spoken to new listeners, in new households, over thousands of years. In effect, every cat and owner pair may be quietly shaping a small, private dialect of their own, refined meow by meow, over years of living together. Fact 53. That flexibility shows up clearly the moment researchers start listening closely to context. A study analyzing hundreds of meows recorded in different everyday situations, greetings, feeding time, play, being placed in a carrier, found consistent differences in pitch, length, and melody depending on the situation. A meow produced inside a carrier tends to fall sharply in pitch, a pattern associated with distress. A meow produced during a warm greeting or a cuddle stays comparatively level and calm. It is a little like recognizing the difference between a rushed, clipped tone and a warm, unhurried one in a friend's voice, without needing to understand a single word they are saying. The shape of the sound itself, quite apart from its volume, is already telling you something real about what your cat is feeling in that exact moment. Fact 54. Now consider the purr and how strange its actual mechanics turn out to be. A purr is produced by tiny, rapid twitches of the muscles surrounding a cat's voice box, opening and closing the airway roughly 20 to 30 times every single second on both the inhale and the exhale. In one striking piece of research, scientists in Vienna were able to recreate a purring sound entirely by gently blowing air through the vocal folds of a cat that had recently died of natural causes, with the owner's consent. The sound still worked, suggesting the deep, resonant tone comes largely from the physical structure of the tissue itself, rather than from precise, constant control by the brain. It is a little like discovering that a haunting, beautiful note from an old instrument can still be coaxed out, even without a musician actively playing it, simply because of how the instrument itself was built. Fact 55. Most people assume a purr means one thing, and one thing only: contentment. The truth is a great deal more complicated. Purring shows up reliably while a cat rests happily in your lap, but it also shows up while a cat is frightened, while a cat is injured, and in some documented cases, while a cat is close to death. Rather than a simple signal of happiness, many researchers now favor a broader idea that purring functions partly as reassurance, a kind of ongoing message that says, essentially, "I am not a threat," offered as much to calm the cat itself as to calm whoever is nearby. It is a little like the way a person might quietly hum to themselves during a stressful moment, not because everything is fine, but specifically because it is not, and the humming helps. The next time your cat purrs through something difficult, know that the sound may be less a report of comfort and more an attempt to create it. Fact 56. There is one particular version of the purr worth knowing, one specifically engineered, it seems, to get your attention. When a cat wants something urgently, especially food, some researchers have found it will sometimes blend a higher-pitched, almost cry-like element into the low rumble of an ordinary purr. Acoustically, that added layer bears a notable resemblance to the frequency profile of a human infant's cry, a sound humans are, for obvious evolutionary reasons, exceptionally poorly equipped to ignore. It is a little like a familiar, calming song suddenly having a faint, urgent note woven into it, one that quietly hijacks a part of your attention built for something else entirely. Whether or not your cat has any awareness of what that sound does to you, it is remarkably effective. Very few people manage to sleep through it. Fact 57. That low, rumbling purr may be doing something more than communicating at all. It may be quietly repairing. The frequency range of a typical cat's purr, somewhere between 25 and 150 Hz, overlaps closely with frequencies used in certain therapeutic treatments for human bone and soft tissue healing. Some researchers have proposed that cats purr not only when content, but frequently while resting, as a low-energy, built-in mechanism for maintaining strong bones and healthy tissue across long hours of stillness. It is a little like carrying a small, quiet machine built into your own chest, one that gently tends to minor wear and tear simply by running in the background while you rest. And there is a curious postscript to this. Those same low frequencies, felt through your hand while petting a purring cat, may be doing something gently good for you as well. Fact 58. Purring and meowing, it turns out, carry identity very differently. A recent analysis comparing hundreds of recordings found that a cat's purr functions almost like an acoustic fingerprint, reliably distinguishing one individual from another with striking consistency. Meows, by contrast, proved far less reliable as identity markers, varying more with mood, context, and the specific relationship between a cat and the person it was addressing. It is a little like realizing that a person's laugh stays remarkably consistent no matter what is said. while their choice of words shifts constantly depending on who they are speaking to and why. Your cat's purr, in other words, may be the closest thing it has to a signature. Its meow, meanwhile, stays endlessly adaptable, shaped moment to moment, entirely around you. Fact 59. Now, a small but genuinely useful correction for anyone who has ever mistaken a swishing tail for a happy one. Unlike a dog, a cat lashing or thumping its tail from side to side is very rarely expressing joy. That motion tends to appear during moments of frustration, overstimulation, or mounting irritation, often right before a cat decides it has had enough of being petted, held, or crowded. Slow, deliberate flick, partway through an otherwise calm petting session, can be an early, gentle warning, arriving well before any hiss or swat does. It is a little like noticing a friend's jaw tighten slightly mid-conversation, a small, easy-to-miss signal that patience is beginning to run thin, long before any words confirm it. Learning to notice that flick, rather than overriding it, may be one of the kindest small skills a cat owner can ever develop. Fact 60. We end this hour with the gentlest signal of all, the one we set aside earlier without quite finishing. Remember that a cat does not need to blink often to keep its eyes healthy, the way you do, which makes a slow, deliberate blink, offered directly at you, eyes narrowing gently and closing for just a moment longer than necessary, a genuine choice rather than a reflex. Researchers studying human-cat communication have found that people understand a cat's intentions far more accurately when they can see this kind of visual signal alongside a vocal one, together, rather than relying on sound alone. Fittingly, the hardest emotion for most people to correctly read in a cat is discontentment, the quiet, subtle signs of unease that rarely come with any sound at all. It is a little like realizing that the softest, quietest message someone can send you, a slow, trusting closing of the eyes, was, all along, one of the clearest sentences in their entire vocabulary. The next time your cat looks at you and blinks slowly, try offering the same gesture back. In a language built almost entirely for the two of you, that may be the closest thing to saying, quietly, "I understand you too." All of this, the meows shaped just for you, the purrs that soothe and heal, the tails and slow blinking eyes, raises a deeper question we have circled all evening without quite landing on. What kind of mind is actually behind all of it? It is time, finally, to go looking inside. Part 7. What's going on in that small skull? Tunanful fact. 61. To understand a cat's mind, one team of neuroscientists took a rather unusual approach. They gently dissolved several preserved animal brains down into a uniform liquid, then counted the individual neurons floating inside it, one cell at a time. The results for cats were revealing. A domestic cat's cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outer layer responsible for complex thought, contains somewhere around 250 million neurons. A dog's cortex, by comparison, holds roughly twice that number. Strangely, a brown bear, despite carrying a cortex nearly 10 times larger by mass than a cat's, ends up with almost exactly the same neuron count. It is a little like discovering that a small, tightly packed engine can rival a much larger one, simply because raw size was never really the thing that mattered most. Fewer neurons does not mean a simpler mind. It only means the story is more interesting than a single number can capture, as the rest of this hour will show. Fact 62. Consider a moment most animals, and most humans, would consider entirely unremarkable. Walking past several bowls, eating from 2 of them, and wandering off. Researchers gave cats exactly that experience, letting them eat from 2 of 4 baited bowls, then removing the cats for a period of time before unexpectedly bringing them back. With no training, no reward for remembering, and no reason to expect a test at all, the cats still showed a clear preference for investigating the bowls they had not yet eaten from, rather than randomly revisiting ones they already knew were empty. It is a little like walking back into a kitchen hours after a party and instinctively remembering exactly which snacks you had already tried, without ever consciously trying to memorize the list. This is what researchers call incidentally encoded memory, formed from a single, ordinary experience, with no active effort involved. It is one of the clearest hints yet that cats carry something resembling a genuine memory of specific past events, not just a simple learned habit. Fact 63. In a follow-up version of that same experiment, researchers raised the difficulty. Instead of only tracking where food had already been eaten, cats needed to remember what had been in each container: food, an inedible object, or nothing at all, alongside where it had been. The cats managed both. They reliably directed more attention toward containers that had previously held food they had not yet eaten, correctly combining memory of location with memory of content after only one brief exposure. Some measurements even suggested this kind of memory could persist for up to 12 hours afterward. It is a little like remembering, hours later, not just which drawer in an unfamiliar house held something interesting, but exactly what that something was. Researchers describe this as a what and where memory, 2 of the essential ingredients that make up episodic memory in humans, the ability to mentally revisit a specific, unrepeated moment from the past. Fact 64. There is an even more fundamental cognitive skill worth pausing on here, one so basic to human adults that we rarely notice we have it: object permanence, the simple understanding that something still exists even after it disappears from view. Human infants typically develop a solid version of this understanding by around 8 months of age. Cats, it turns out, reliably demonstrate the same basic skill. In classic tests, a toy is moved behind a series of screens while a cat watches closely. Even after several screens and several turns, cats consistently search in the correct final hiding place, rather than the last spot they happen to see movement. It is a little like glancing away from a friend crossing a crowded room, then confidently walking straight to wherever they must have ended up, based purely on the direction they were headed. For a cat whose next meal frequently disappears behind grass, rocks, or burrows, this is not an abstract skill. It is a basic requirement for successful hunting. Fact 65. A harder version of that same test reveals something more delicate about how animal cognition actually gets measured and how easily it can be missed entirely. The most advanced form of object permanence involves an invisible displacement, tracking an object that was hidden inside something else, like a container, which was then moved out of sight before the object was secretly transferred elsewhere. Some early studies found that adult cats could master even this difficult version. But a more recent study, conducted in cats' own homes rather than a laboratory, found something far messier. More than half the cats tested did not even attempt to search for a hidden toy at all, regardless of how the test was designed, and whether the person hiding it was their own owner or a stranger seemed to matter a great deal. It is a little like assuming someone has forgotten your birthday, when really they simply did not feel like celebrating that particular day, for reasons that had nothing to do with memory at all. Sometimes, the honest scientific answer is not that a cat's mind failed a test. It is that the test itself failed to capture what a cat, on that particular day, felt like showing anyone. Fact 66. Cats also appear to carry a basic, wordless sense of quantity, the kind that lets an animal notice more without ever learning to count. In discrimination tasks using small piles of food, cats reliably told apart quantities that differed by a ratio as fine as 4 to 5, correctly approaching the larger pile more often than chance would predict. That is a remarkably subtle distinction, noticing the difference between, say, 4 treats and 5, without lining them up or literally counting a single one. It is a little like glancing at 2 nearly identical stacks of coins across a room and immediately sensing, without counting, which one is very slightly taller. This kind of approximate number sense shows up across a wide range of animal species, and its presence in cats is one more small thread connecting their private inner world to something recognizably similar in our own. Fact 67. There is also evidence that cats can learn remarkably quickly, in a way that echoes one of the earliest building blocks of human language. In one study, cats were shown 2 arbitrary pairings of a picture and a sound, with no meaning attached to either beforehand. After only brief exposure, when researchers swapped which sound went with which picture, cats reliably noticed the change, staring longer at the now mismatched pairing. This kind of rapid picture-sound association is thought to be one of the basic mental tools infants rely on when they first begin learning that specific words refer to specific things. It is a little like meeting someone once, hearing their name exactly one time, and somehow already sensing, days later, that something is wrong if someone else answers to it instead. Whatever is happening inside a cat's mind during that instant of noticing, it is fast, and it requires surprisingly little repetition to take hold. Fact 68. Much of what looks purely instinctive in a cat, it turns out, is actually taught, quietly, through demonstration. A mother cat does not simply let her kittens figure out hunting alone. She brings them dead prey first, letting them investigate it safely, then gradually introduces live prey, releasing it near the nest so her kittens can practice catching and killing it themselves, often while she demonstrates the technique directly in front of them. Kittens raised alongside this kind of teaching become measurably more skilled hunters than those without it. It is a little like a parent walking a child slowly through a difficult skill, step by step, adjusting the difficulty exactly as the child grows more capable. Much of what we call a cat's wild instinct, then, is not purely automatic. A good portion of it was carefully, patiently taught by a mother who had no lesson plan except her kitten's full attention. Fact 69. For all of this quiet sophistication, there is one well-known cognitive test cats appear to fail almost entirely, and it is worth mentioning honestly without smoothing it over. When researchers reviewed cats' reactions to mirrors and reflective images, including footage from cats interacting with actual mirrors and with reflective filters online, they found little convincing evidence that cats recognize their own reflection as themselves. Most treat it as an unfamiliar cat, responding with curiosity, wariness, or occasional aggression, rather than the kind of self-directed investigation, like checking a mark on their own face, that indicates true mirror self-recognition in a small number of other species. It is a little like glimpsing a stranger's reflection in a shop window and instinctively glancing over your shoulder before quietly realizing, or in this case, perhaps never quite realizing, that the stranger was only ever you. Intelligence, it turns out, is not one single ladder every mind climbs at the same pace. Some rungs a cat reaches easily. Others, for reasons still not fully understood, it simply never needed to. Fact 70. So gather everything we have found inside that small skull tonight. A cortex holding roughly half the neurons of a dog's, yet still capable of remembering a single, unrepeated event hours later. An understanding that hidden things still exist, a quiet sense of quantity, and a talent for linking sounds to meaning almost instantly. Skills passed down not by instinct alone, but through patient teaching from a mother who somehow knew exactly how to raise the difficulty, one step at a time. None of these abilities exist as separate parlor tricks. Together, they form the actual architecture of a functioning, private mind, one working quietly behind two calm eyes, almost all day, every day, largely unnoticed. And it turns out this same mind has one particular specialty above all others, one so central to a cat's entire existence that nearly everything else we have covered tonight ultimately serves it. It is time now to look at exactly what a cat's brain was built, first and foremost, to do. Part 8. The Hunter's Mind. Fact 71. Watch a cat approach anything resembling prey, a toy, a bird outside a window, a moving shadow, and you will see the same ancient sequence unfold, almost every time. First comes the stalk, low to the ground, head extended forward, movement slow and deliberate, gradually accelerating as the distance closes. Then comes a brief, tense pause, muscles gathering, before a final explosive sprint and a leap, ending with both front paws striking together. Every stage is distinct, practiced, and instantly recognizable once you know to look for it. It is a little like watching someone quietly rehearse the exact same short piece of choreography, over and over, regardless of whether an audience is even watching. The soft toy skidding across your living room floor tonight is not receiving a simplified version of this sequence. It is receiving the entire thing, performed in full, exactly as it would be performed against something with a heartbeat. Fact 72. Once a cat has actually made contact with prey, an entirely different motor pattern often kicks in. Researchers call it prey shaking. The cat grips the prey firmly in its jaws and rapidly shakes its head from side to side, a violent, efficient motion built to injure, disorient, or kill quickly. It is a little unsettling to watch up close, precisely because it looks so deliberate, so practiced, arriving without hesitation the instant it is needed. It is a little like the split-second reflex of catching a falling object out of the corner of your eye, an action that happens faster than conscious thought, already complete before you have finished registering what occurred. This is not aggression in the way we usually think of the word. It is simply the final, mechanical step of an ancient toolkit, one your cat still carries fully intact, whether or not it is ever truly needed again. Fact 73. Here is something that puzzles many cat owners. A cat that is fed regularly, generously, and on schedule will often still hunt, stalking bugs, batting at falling leaves, watching birds with rapt, motionless focus. The explanation lies in how hunting actually works for a solitary predator. Each individual hunting attempt succeeds, on average, less than half the time. If a cat waited until it was truly hungry before beginning to hunt, it would risk starving before ever managing a successful catch. So cats evolved to become opportunistic instead, hunting whenever the chance presents itself, entirely apart from whether their stomach is currently empty. It is a little like never waiting until you are truly out of savings before looking for new opportunities, because by the time the need becomes urgent, it may already be too late to act. Hunger, for a cat, turns out to be only one small input among several. Opportunity is often the louder voice. Fact 74. That opportunistic instinct does not simply vanish once a cat moves indoors and gains a reliable food bowl. Studies comparing feral cats to well-fed house cats found a striking difference in how much of each day is spent hunting. An unowned feral cat, hunting purely to survive, may spend upward of 12 hours a day engaged in some form of active hunting behavior. A well-cared-for pet cat, by comparison, spends closer to 3 hours a day on the very same behaviors, redirected now toward toys, insects, shadows, and the occasional unlucky housefly. It is a little like discovering that a retired athlete still trains daily out of habit, long after the competitions that once demanded it have ended. 3 hours a day is not nothing. Somewhere beneath every lazy afternoon nap, an ancient occupation is still quietly, faithfully clocking in. Fact 75. There is a behavior many cat owners find genuinely uncomfortable to witness. A cat that catches something small, then appears to play with it rather than finishing the job quickly. Researchers believe this so-called toying behavior arises from a real internal conflict. A cat needs to kill its prey, but many prey animals are capable of biting, scratching, or otherwise injuring a cat that gets too careless. The batting, releasing, and re-catching that looks almost playful may actually be a cautious, repeated testing of how dangerous a particular catch really is, especially when the cat is not hungry enough to feel urgency about finishing the encounter quickly. It is a little like circling a genuinely difficult decision several times before committing to it, weighing the risk carefully instead of acting on the very first impulse. What can look, from the outside, like carelessness or even cruelty may actually be a small, careful negotiation between instinct and self-preservation. Fact 76. This same hunting circuitry is almost certainly what powers ordinary play with toys, far more literally than most people realize. Cats consistently show stronger, longer-lasting interest in toys that resemble the size and texture of natural prey, small, furred, and prone to sudden, erratic movement. And the hungrier a cat happens to be at the moment of play, the more intense and sustained that play tends to become. Exactly the pattern you would expect if play behavior and hunting behavior were drawing from the very same underlying drive. It is a little like realizing that a child's imaginative game of pretend cooking is not simply entertainment, but active, hands-on rehearsal for a skill they will genuinely need one day. That length of string dragged across your floor tonight is not distracting your cat from being a hunter. For those few minutes, it is allowing your cat to be exactly that. Fact 77. Not every instinctive behavior traces back to hunting. Some trace back even further, to a time before a cat could hunt at all. Watch a cat need a blanket, a cushion, or your own lap, alternating one paw and then the other, claws often extending slightly with each press. This motion is a near-perfect echo of the exact movement kittens use while nursing, pressing rhythmically against their mother to encourage milk flow. Many cats never fully outgrow it, carrying the behavior into adulthood, often paired with contented purring, frequently as a gentle prelude to sleep. It is a little like catching yourself, as an adult, still tracing the exact same small, comforting habit you relied on as a small child, without ever quite remembering when it started. In this one particular gesture, your cat is not performing an ancient hunting skill at all. It is simply, quietly, still being a kitten. Fact 78. There is one more small, endearing behavior worth mentioning, one nearly every cat owner has witnessed and few can fully explain. A cat perched at a window, staring intently at a bird just out of reach, jaw trembling in a rapid series of small chirping sounds. This chattering behavior appears specifically during moments of intense predatory focus, fixed gaze, tense posture, prey visible but entirely unreachable. Some researchers suspect it may reflect a genuine surge of adrenaline in anticipation of a hunt about to begin. Others suspect a kind of frustration, the motor sequence for a killing bite trying to fire, with no actual prey present to complete it. It is a little like the wordless, restless energy of watching a goal come agonizingly close, only to have the glass of a window quietly stand in the way. Whatever is happening internally in that moment, it is clearly, unmistakably, an entire hunt playing out, somewhere just behind two intensely focused eyes. Fact 79. Here is a small detail that complicates the idea that hunting skill comes purely from lived experience. Cats raised entirely indoors, with no exposure whatsoever to real prey, often respond to prey like toys and sounds just as quickly, sometimes even more quickly, than cats who regularly spend time outdoors hunting for real. Researchers are not entirely certain why. It may be that cats deprived of real hunting opportunities carry a stronger pent-up drive to engage with anything resembling prey. It may also be that without real experience of danger or injury, indoor cats simply approach these stimuli with less caution. It is a little like noticing that someone who has only ever read about a sport sometimes throws themselves into a casual game of it with more raw enthusiasm than someone who plays it seriously and carefully every week. Either way, the underlying instinct clearly does not require real-world practice to stay fully intact, ready, waiting patiently behind glass or behind closed doors for its moment. Fact 80. All of this intense, focused hunting behavior helps explain something else entirely, something quieter. Why a cat sleeps so very much. A typical house cat spends somewhere between 12 and 18 hours a day asleep, with much of the remaining time spent resting quietly or grooming. Real hunting, unlike the slow, sustained effort of a grazing animal, depends on short, explosive bursts of speed and power, the kind of effort that cannot be sustained for long and that demands considerable recovery time in between. It is a little like an elite sprinter, whose entire training revolves not around constant motion, but around conserving enormous reserves of energy for a handful of intense, decisive seconds. Every long, unbothered nap your cat takes today is not laziness. It is a solitary hunter, quietly and patiently recharging for a burst of effort it may, or may not, ever actually need to use again. But for a mind this thoroughly built for solitary survival, needing no one and depending on no one, there remains one genuine mystery left completely unexplored tonight. Why does an animal engineered this precisely for independence let anyone in at all? Part 9. The Bonds We Don't See. Fact 81. Earlier tonight, we discovered that a cat can hold a picture of your face in mind, summoned by nothing but the sound of your voice. There is one more detail about that ability, worth returning to now, one that changes how it feels entirely. This kind of recognition does not appear to extend to just anyone. Researchers testing this cross-modal ability found it reliably present between cats and their own owners, but largely absent when the same cats were tested with unfamiliar people. Compare this to horses and dogs, both of which have shown some ability to generalize this same skill towards strangers, and the difference becomes clear. A cat's recognition is not a general skill applied broadly to people in general. It appears to be something built specifically, almost exclusively, around you. It is a little like realizing that a particular, private song only ever plays in your head at the sound of one specific person's voice, and simply refuses to play for anyone else. Fact 82. That exclusive recognition, it turns out, is not fixed. It grows sharper the longer a bond has had time to settle. In studies of name and face learning within a household, cats that had lived with their human family for a longer stretch of time showed a stronger, more reliable reaction when a name and a face were deliberately mismatched. The longer the relationship, the more confidently a cat's expectations about who belongs to which name and face seem to be set. It is a little like an old friendship, one where you no longer need to think consciously about the small details of someone's habits and preferences, because years of quiet, cumulative attention have already folded them into how you see them. Every additional year spent together, it seems, is not simply passing time. For a cat, it is closer to fine-tuning. Fact 83. All of this makes a cat's attachment to a person genuinely strange when you consider what came before it. Unlike most domesticated animals, a cat has never fully lost its capacity to survive entirely without us. Researchers studying the ecology of domestic cats have pointed out that, more than almost any other companion species, cats retain the behavioral and reproductive independence to slip back into a self-sustaining, feral existence if circumstances required it. Some have described the modern house cat's role, quite memorably, as a predator for hire, an animal that works alongside humans without ever fully needing them. It is a little like a skilled, independent contractor choosing, freely and repeatedly, to keep showing up to the same job, long after the contract technically expired. Every bond a cat forms with a person, then, is not the product of dependency bred carefully into it over generations. It is closer to a choice, made and quietly renewed. Fact 84. Because of that independence, a persistent myth has grown up around cats. The idea that they simply do not care whether you come or go. The truth sits somewhere in between two extremes. Cats generally show fewer of the more dramatic, textbook signs of separation-related distress that are well documented in dogs. But careful behavioral studies have also found genuine evidence of separation-related difficulties in some cats. Changes in behavior when a closely bonded person is gone for an extended stretch of time. It is a little like a quiet, steady friend who never makes a scene about missing you, and yet, somehow, you can tell something in the room feels different whenever you have been away too long. Independence, it turns out, was never the same thing as indifference. A cat can hold both at once. Fact 85. There is a genuinely surprising twist buried inside the very same secure base research we explored earlier tonight, one worth returning to now. When researchers compared cats living in shelters to cats living comfortably in long-term homes, the shelter cats displayed noticeably more proximity-seeking behavior toward the person in the room, staying closer, rubbing more, showing more overt signs of wanting contact. The comfortably housed cats, by comparison, often seemed more relaxed about exploring independently, dividing their attention more evenly between the person and their surroundings. It is a little like the difference between a child clinging tightly to a parent in an unfamiliar place and a child confident enough in that same parent's presence to wander off and explore freely nearby. A cat that seems less openly clingy toward you may not be a cat that cares less. It may simply be a cat secure enough not to need to prove it constantly. Fact 86. There is a small, hidden trait tucked inside nearly every cat, one almost no owner ever thinks to look for: a preference for one paw over the other. Across multiple studies, roughly 78% of cats show a consistent preference for either their left or right paw when reaching for something. Unlike humans, cats show no overall population-wide bias toward one side. But a curious pattern does emerge by sex. Female cats lean somewhat more often toward the right paw, males somewhat more often toward the left, and cats with a clear, consistent paw preference tend to react faster and more accurately during precise physical tasks than cats without one. It is a little like discovering, quite by accident, that a close friend has always quietly favored their left hand for certain small tasks, a detail you simply never had a reason to notice before. Somewhere in every cat's daily movements, a small, consistent handedness, or rather, pawedness, has been running the whole time, entirely unremarked upon. Fact 87. The bond you share with your cat, it turns out, is not something invented specifically for humans at all. It is something older, something cats already knew how to do with each other. Within cat colonies, individuals form clear, lasting preferences for particular companions, grooming them, resting curled against them, greeting them with a raised tail. Researchers describe these as preferred associates, essentially close friendships nested within a wider social group, distinct from the more distant, occasionally tense relationships a cat holds with less familiar colony members. It is a little like discovering that the specific warmth a close friend shows you was never a special exception they invented just for you. It is simply how they treat the handful of people they have decided, over time, are truly worth the closeness. When your cat rests against you, rubs your leg, or seeks you out, it may not be offering you a uniquely human relationship. It may be quietly inviting you into a friendship structure it already understood perfectly well, long before you arrived. Fact 88. Much of a cat's social life, even among other cats, is conducted in a register so quiet it is easy to miss entirely. Disagreements between cats are rarely resolved through open conflict. Instead, researchers have documented a subtle grammar of deference, a slight turn of the head, ears lowered just enough, a small step back, a decision to simply walk a different path rather than cross paths with another cat at all. Genuine confrontation is almost always a last resort, not a first instinct. It is a little like two co-workers who have quietly agreed, without ever discussing it directly, to simply take turns using a shared space, avoiding any friction long before it could ever become necessary. If you have ever noticed your cat calmly shift out of your path as you walk through a room, or quietly relocate the moment you sit down nearby, you are watching this same ancient, careful grammar offered to you without a single word. Fact 89. Taken all together, something becomes clear about the particular shape of a cat's affection. It rarely announces itself loudly. A slow blink, held a fraction of a second longer than necessary. A tail raised gently on approach, an ear turned toward the sound of your specific voice out of every other sound in the room. A quiet decision to sleep pressed against your side rather than anywhere else available in the house. None of these signals are dramatic. Each one, on its own, could easily be missed entirely by someone who was not paying close attention. It is a little like realizing that the people who love you most quietly are often the hardest ones to notice loving you at all, simply because their signals were never built to be loud. A nervous system shaped for a life of careful, solitary survival was never going to produce grand, theatrical displays of affection. It produces this instead, small, constant, and easy to overlook. Fact 90. So return one final time to the small animal curled beside you tonight, the one we opened this whole journey with. Everything we have gathered across this hour changes how that image should feel. That closeness is not owed to you by breeding, or obligation, or dependency. It is something closer to an ongoing, quietly renewed choice, made by an animal that could, in a very real sense, survive perfectly well without ever making it. A recognition system built almost exclusively around you. An independence retained, not surrendered. A friendship structure older than humanity itself. One your cat simply decided, at some point, to fold you into. There is nothing small about being chosen this way, by something that never strictly needed to choose you at all. And with that, we arrive at the last hour of our journey together tonight, the part where we step back from every individual fact and simply sit, quietly, with what all of it adds up to. Part 10. The Quiet Companion. Fact 91. Think, for a moment, about where a cat actually chooses to sleep. Not simply the warmest spot in a room, though warmth matters. Not simply the safest, most enclosed corner available, though safety matters too. Very often, a cat chooses you, pressed against your side, curled into the crook of your knees, settled directly on your chest, rising and falling gently with your breath. It is a little like watching someone quietly pick the one seat out of an entire empty room closest to a person they trust. Out of every warm, safe, quiet option available in an entire house, tonight, your cat may simply be choosing the version of comfort that happens to include you. Fact 92. Here is something worth sitting with gently. The particular bond your cat has built, the exact voice it recognizes, the exact face it holds in mind, the exact rhythm of footsteps it has learned by heart, none of it could exist anywhere else, with anyone else. Had your cat lived its entire life with a different person, in a different home, an entirely different, equally specific bond would have quietly formed instead, shaped by different footsteps, a different voice, a different daily rhythm. It is a little like realizing that a favorite, well-worn path through a familiar forest was never inevitable. It was simply the path that happened to get walked, again and again, until it became the only one that felt like home. This particular closeness, the one sitting beside you right now, was built specifically, only, by the two of you. Fact 93. Like any mind, a cat slowly changes with time. Just as researchers have found in dogs and in humans, cats show gradual shifts in memory, behavior, and cognition as they age, changes so slow and subtle they are often mistaken for nothing more than a cat simply growing calmer, or quieter, or more content to rest. It is a little like watching a close friendship deepen gradually over decades, so slowly that no single day ever feels like a turning point, until one day you notice how far it has actually traveled. The recognition, the attachment, the quiet daily rituals we have spent this entire evening exploring, none of it is frozen in place. It continues shifting, gently, for as long as the two of you continue sharing a life together. Fact 94. Consider, for just a moment, everything actually happening right now, in this exact instant, inside the small mind resting somewhere near you. A nose quietly reading the particular scent of this exact room. Whiskers sensing the faint movement of air around them. Ears tuned to a register of sound, reaching far beyond anything you will ever consciously hear. And somewhere beneath all of it, a memory system gently filing this precise, ordinary moment away as one more small addition to everything it already understands about you. It is a little like discovering that an entire quiet universe of attention has been running constantly, this whole time, directed at nothing more dramatic than an ordinary evening. Nothing about this moment needed to be remarkable for your cat to be paying this much attention to it. Ordinary was always enough. Fact 95. A cat's life, compared to a human one, is short. A handful of years, if you are fortunate, perhaps close to 2 decades. And yet, within that comparatively small span of time, an extraordinary proportion of it, quietly, patiently, has been oriented toward you, learning your voice before it could do much else, mapping your face onto the sound of you, building, slowly, a private sense of your moods, your schedule, your specific way of moving through a room. It is a little like realizing that someone with only a limited, precious amount of time available chose, again and again, to spend a significant portion of it simply paying attention to you. There is nothing casual about that kind of attention, however quietly it has always been offered. Fact 96. We can return, now, to the very question this whole journey began with. Why would a solitary, self-sufficient hunter, needing no one, ever evolve to care this much about a different species entirely? There was never a rule requiring it. No line of code demanding affection, no unavoidable biological debt owed to us. And yet, across 10,000 quiet years, this is what so many cats simply, freely became. Watchful, attached, willing to fold an entirely different species into the same quiet grammar of trust, once reserved only for their own kind. It is a little like discovering that the closest bonds in life were never actually required of anyone. They were offered freely, again and again, by creatures who never strictly had to offer them at all. Fact 97. There is something worth acknowledging plainly before we close. You, specifically, exist inside another mind right now, in exactly the particular, detailed way we have spent this entire evening describing. Your voice has a place there. Your face has a place there. Your habits, your moods, the specific sound of you walking through a room, all of it has been carefully, patiently mapped by something that never once asked permission and never expected anything in return for doing so. It is a little like discovering, quite unexpectedly, that you have been gently, thoroughly known this entire time by someone who never needed to announce it. That is worth resting with for a moment, as your own eyes grow heavier and this long day finally begins to loosen its grip on you. Fact 98. Somewhere near you tonight, or somewhere far from here, entirely, a small animal is beginning to settle down as well. Eyes softening, body curling inward. That familiar, low rumble beginning to rise and fall in its chest, whether from simple contentment or from something quieter and more careful, the way we learned it can be. It is a little like two separate, private worlds, one large and one small, quietly settling into stillness at almost exactly the same moment, without either one needing to announce it to the other. If there is a cat resting near you right now, let your hand find it gently, if it wants to be found. If there is not, simply picture one, curled somewhere warm, breathing slowly, in rhythm with everything we have spent tonight learning about it. Fact 99. So we return, finally, to where we began. Somewhere in a home tonight, A small animal is curled nearby, watching with eyes that never quite explain themselves. We know so much more now about what sits behind that quiet gaze. A voice, held carefully in memory, a private map of exactly where you are, a name, learned patiently, without a single lesson, an attachment, structurally not so different from our own, senses built for a world we can only partly imagine, a mind capable of remembering a single, unrepeated afternoon, an ancient hunter still fully intact beneath the softness, and a bond freely offered again and again by something that never strictly needed to offer it at all. None of it was ever small. All of it, quietly, was happening the entire time. Fact 100. Maybe your cat has understood you all along. Maybe, long before tonight, it had already learned your voice, your face, your habits, your particular quiet moods, more completely than you ever gave it credit for. Maybe every slow blink, every raised tail, every low, rumbling purr against your side was never simple instinct at all. Maybe it was closer to a small, patient sentence, offered again and again in a language built specifically, quietly, only for you. You do not need to remember any of the facts we gathered tonight. Simply let them settle, gently, the way a small, warm weight settles beside you in the dark, understanding far more than it will ever need to say out loud. So rest now and let go. There is nothing more to learn tonight, and nowhere else you need to be. Let your thoughts loosen. Let your breathing slow and settle and grow heavy, the way a small creature settles beside you in the quiet dark, asking nothing, expecting nothing, simply choosing to stay close. You are safe. You are held in more ways than you may have ever realized. You are, in your own home, deeply and quietly known. There is no need to hold on to anything we have spoken of tonight. The voices remembered, the maps built from sound, the small, careful language of tails and slow blinking eyes. Simply let it all drift now, gently, like warmth fading softly from a sunlit windowsill, through your quieting mind. Sleep now, gently. And somewhere nearby, or somewhere in your memory, a small, watchful companion is finally letting go too, curling in closer, settling into the same soft stillness you are settling into now. We will be here whenever you wish to wander back into these quiet corners of the world you share with the ones who love you. Good night.